Hi, my name is Kenny Thacker, and I am the founder of 100 Roses from Concrete. And today I want to talk to you about growth in the eye of the storm. So we can all agree that 2020 is canceled. But I must admit that when the notifications about COVID-19 became more frequent, I start to felt like things were getting a little dark. And never in my wildest science fiction dreams did I think that the pandemic would affect the industry that I've put 14 years of my life into. So yeah, things were getting a little dark. But then they started to get even darker when I started to hear office mumblings about layoffs, budget cuts, summer internships getting canceled. And once a lot of those things were confirmed, I knew that a lot of other agencies in the advertising industry were going to follow suit. As the founder of a new organization that was founded to bring together men of color in advertising, marketing, media, and PR, I knew that there was something I had to do, but I just didn't know what it was going to be. And due to the fact that I had no corporate sponsors or even celebrity industry members, I really didn't have much to work with, even though I knew I had a very strong group of men that were willing to kind of do whatever crazy brain idea that I had to kind of make things better, especially due to the fact that when I was thinking about how dark COVID was going to affect the industry, I thought about young people of color in particular and how they were going to lose the necessary access, exposure, and opportunity and experience this very summer that could help them with their careers. But due to the pandemic, they were going to lose all of that because Lord knows there's already enough disparity in the advertising industry when it comes to talent of color. So I want to just talk about some of those disparities and how we can maybe fix those. First is we have to give people access, right? Access is so very important to get into this industry. And it's just something that communities of color just don't have, even though they have a buying power of $5 trillion, but you never really see them in leadership roles or even in the actual agencies themselves because they just don't have access to that. They know what advertising is, they see it on a variety of screens, but they don't have that access. So it's very important for them to have that type of access. Exposure. When there's lack of access, you have less exposure to the ad industry, and even the possibility of young talent of color making advertising an option is even less until they get to college, right? They know what ads are, but they don't really know about the industry. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that if someone is not exposed to something, the less they know about it and the less interested they are. And I could go even further to say, if they're not exposed or even see representation in that specific field, the less they're inspired or even encouraged or interested to even be about it. Why was I interested in being a rapper when I was like, in junior high school or high school? Well, it's because I was exposed to it. I was exposed to it on the radio. I was exposed to it on TV. And even though LL Cool J and Heavy D were not from the state where I was from, I could still relate to their stories, and their representation in those areas is what, had me all ready to be a rapper. But I digress. I never became a rapper, but I was exposed to it. And that's the point I'm trying to make. When you combine the lack of access and exposure, you get the lack of opportunities in a certain field. So we're talking about advertising, of course. And who gets those opportunities? Well, it's those that have that access and exposure, whether it's directly or indirectly. The lack of opportunity in advertising for marginalized and underrepresented communities is as old as the industry itself. Whether it's keeping people from different ethnic backgrounds, genders, or abilities completely out, or letting them get but so far, is a cancer that has plagued this industry for as long as I can, say. I don't even know. It's so long. But the thing is, these people are considered less than the majority, than the people that are considered them, that are than the people that are considered the majority at these agencies, big and small. So for agencies to even call themselves creative, how really creative is it if everyone looks the same? But it goes back to giving people these opportunities. Experience. Experience is just yet another hurdle that those without access and exposure and opportunity face when trying to get into the industry. Some people can attest that they've seen people go from intern to director in their agencies, or even heard people talk about someone and say, I can see he or she running this place in 10 years. But I've never heard that about a person of color, saying that, yeah, that person is going to be running this place in 10 years. Now, is that because what we've known leadership to look like in the advertising industry is all the same, but not necessarily people of color? That's not really fair. Just as people are promoted based on potential, the same should go as the people that are promoted based on their experience. So I know, and you know, probably some rock stars in this industry that have been passed up on by many of agency. But then those same rock stars were also hired and developed and invested in by those agencies and have been incredibly successful. So here's a chart of the US population versus the chart of the advertising population, right? Everyone knows this chart. Majority of the United States, yes, is about 60% white, and it's kind of coming down. But the advertising industry holds very tight at like 65% of higher, and then people of color have to split like 35% or less. With these small numbers, you have to see that with the lack of access, exposure, opportunity, and experience, that they have to deal with all four of these things and still have a very small number of the population in this industry. And the problem lies in that this industry has been very disproportionate in the way that it hires, develops, and promotes talent of color. So when the darkness of COVID hit, and it was knocking at the door of young, talented, multicultural talent, I knew that I had to do something because it was literally stripping them of these four things that I mentioned earlier: the access, the exposure, the opportunity, and the experience. So I had to do something. Back in 2016, I created a program called the Young Commodores, and it was for G.R.O.W.T.H, now called Wonderman Thompson, and it was a college high school mashup of incredible, beautiful young people, and they managed a nonprofit client over the time that they were with me for about 8 weeks. Since this was the first summer that I wasn't with G.R.O.W.T.H, I knew that I had to do something to kind of provide that same experience to a bunch of young people that were going to be losing that kind of experience this summer due to the fact that summer internships were being canceled. So I wrote a program that provides a select group of multicultural college students across the country a virtual agency experience in the eye of the storm of COVID-19, but also the soon-to-be racial unrest in our country. I called it growth, giving real opportunity with talent and heart, because that is the only way we're going to narrow and get rid of this racial, gender, religious, and ability disparity in the advertising industry. This summer, we have 53 of the best and the brightest advertising and communication minds across the country in partnership with the Advertising Club of New York and Save the Internships NY. And I can attest to every single face on this slide that they are all hungry, they are humble, or foremost, they are all extremely human. So, how do you find growth in the eye of the storm? It starts with commitment. It starts with commitment. For too long, agencies have played the dating game when it comes to talent of color and women without really putting a ring on it. When it comes to committing to hiring, developing, paying, and promoting them fairly. Now is the time to commit. Focus. We have to focus on where to find talent of color, right? Because that always seems to be a question. After all my time in the industry, advertising agencies have made it a habit of looking in the same places and finding the same talent. If you go to the same pond every time, you're going to get the same fish when you're going fishing, right? But I think now is the time more than ever for us to start thinking about going into lakes and rivers and oceans, right? Going into bigger bodies of water to find this talent of color so we can increase our diversity. That's how it works. But we have to focus on looking broader than just the normal, comfortable places we're going. I understand that some of these seas and waters and lakes and rivers are going to be uncharted places that we've never been before. But we can all admit that those that can afford that comfort have benefited from it long enough. So now is the time for us to really look outside of ourselves and focus on the bigger body of water when it comes to looking for talent. Engage. Engagement is so crucial. Engage with the few employees of color that you do have. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, find out what they want out of their agency experience and invite them to the culture curation table so they can be active participants in the said culture of your agency. Just don't talk about your culture. Make people be a part of your culture, right? That's very, very important. If there was ever a time to give your inclusion a shot of adrenaline, now is the time. Not because it's the wave and everyone certainly all of a sudden cares about diversity, but because it's the fair and right thing to do. Execution. Last but not least, execution. If your commitment is opportunistic, your focus will be blurred because you'll be focusing on making headlines and not systemic change. If your engagement is focused on your employees of color just because there's racial unrest in this country, then you're missing the mark. You're totally missing the mark. As I tell my beloved clients all the time, if you want proper execution, it needs to come from a place of truth and empathy. Those two places right there. Because if they don't come from those two places, people are going to see right through it and they're going to hold those that are in power accountable. So one last time, I'm asking, how do you find growth in the eye of the storm? Well, it's pretty easy. There cannot be a finish line. There is no finish line when it comes to growth. And the progress that we make during this time should be sustainable and perpetual and should outlive us all. Forbes just said the other week that the advertising industry will not be equal until 2079. Now that's 13 years after the No to 266 campaign said that the advertising industry wouldn't be equal to 2066. Both of these timelines are unacceptable, right? Both dates are unacceptable. However, we have to accept that there's not an overnight fix to decades of disparity from an industry that has thrived and profited off of so many isms: racism, sexism, able-bodied isms. You take your pick, right? So the strategy and the programming must produce tangible change and results. And we should see this on all levels, right? So we should see it on gender. We should see it across able-bodiedness. We should see it on ethnicities. We should see it all across the board. Everything in between, we need to see change. The opportunity will lead to higher creativity, higher productivity, and higher profitability for everyone involved. So if we make these change, these are the fruits of our labor that we'll get. With the opportunity comes the talent that is going to change us and challenge us and just make our work better, and also align our industry finally with the way the world is going, right? That will be the good part of it. But we have to put our hearts in it. We have to put our hearts on it for there to be an impactful effect on the future of agencies and the advertising industry as a whole. Thank you so very much. My name is Keni Thacker.